You have a place in this world. That's the opening sentence of Eric Elnes's book, The Gifts of the Darkwood, and is the foundation for all of our worship together this Lenten season. And we recognize this place in those special moments in our lives when everything comes together. Things that we've been working on, they fall into place, or those times when we feel fully alive and engaged with God and with people and with the world in general. We don't always know how we get there, but we know it when we see it or we experience it. And we wish that we felt it more often, because sometimes we feel so far removed from it, and yet we are always closer than we think. So our time with the Darkwood this Lent will be about rediscovering, if not finding out in the first place, our place in the world at those very points where we feel furthest from it. Now, there is a myth that's been around for a very long time, a myth that has stuck despite its total lack of biblical foundation or even truth in day-to-day living. You've heard it. Maybe you've even bought into it even just a little bit. And that myth goes something like this. If you follow a certain set of rules, life will treat you well. And conversely, if you break the rules, your life will fall apart. Anyone heard that? So when life doesn't match the myth, we find ourselves asking, what's wrong with me? I am doing everything that I know how to do, and still things aren't working out. What's the deal? Well, we can sort of trace this back to Dante, the Italian poet and moral philosopher, who wrote, "In the middle of the road of my life, I awoke in a dark wood where the true way was wholly lost." In Dante's understanding, the dark wood is a place of confusion and emptiness and stumbling that is entered into because of our sin and is inhabited by strange and terrifying things. You don't step into the dark wood if you don't have to. Because according to Dante, it marks the entrance into the inferno and everlasting torment. Now, friends, this is Dante. It is not the Bible. But how many of us feel that way about struggles and failure and uncertainty and aloneness, to name a few of those darkwood places? I've been there. Have you? And it's only when we refuse to believe that myth any longer that we begin to see life as it really is. And part of that seeing is coming to the realization that most of the greatest things in our lives that happen in our lives come after some sort of struggle or massive failure, or just throwing up our hands at what hasn't worked and being surprised when a totally irrational conclusion presents itself and actually works. Now, Christian mystics throughout the age have, maybe not intentionally, but have in their very actions and way of living, countermanded the words of Dante that seem to be so misunderstood and appropriated by people who claim to follow Christ. And they understand struggle not as a punishment for sin, but as the central context in which revelation takes place. So in their understanding, the dark wood is not a place to be avoided, but a place to grow deeper with God. It's been called other things like the dark night of the soul. One person called it the cloud of unknowing. But the mystics taught that in the dark wood, you discover who you are and what your life is all about, and that it's where you actually meet God. And just like Peter, when we find ourselves gung-ho about following Jesus, and we step out with all of the best intentions, and all of a sudden we find ourselves sinking instead of walking on water, that is when we are most likely to reach out our hand to grasp Jesus' extended hand and find ourselves being pulled into a new place of understanding in our lives and our hearts and the ways that we think about the world. So living through the dark wood allows us to emerge with a new perspective, putting us in a position to create beautiful things as we learn to love more deeply. In the book, Elness says, sometimes you need to step away from the security of your boat onto the stormy sea of your own awakening to discover that a sinking stone is a far firmer foundation than you ever have imagined. We embark on this journey this Lent, a journey that will invite us to explore all the places where we find ourselves, and not just those seemingly stable and blessed places, the things that we post about on Facebook, but the ones that feel like utter failure, or the most tenuous at the least. Because those are the places where Jesus says, do not be afraid. It's me calling you out here to find the very depths of your soul. And if you begin to fall, I'll reach out a hand. Amen.